Now, obviously, Saudi Arabia is a league at the moment which can help out a few of these Premier League clubs because they can pay big wages and they can take players across, and they want big name players as well. So they are a bit of an outlet for some of the bigger clubs, and there have been some big names linked as well. Kweku, Alisson and Ederson, the two Brazilian keepers, both linked with a move to Saudi. I'm interested to see how much business there is going to be over the summer from Saudi Arabia. Let's bring in talkSPORT Saudi correspondent Ben Jacobs. Ben, good evening.
Good evening, gents. How are you?
All well, thank you, sir. So let's start with this link, I think particularly for Ederson, because this has been bubbling away for a bit. Is this a move that you think could be likely?
Well, I think Manchester City don't stand in players' ways, and given his age, if the right offer came in, then the door is open. Manchester City's position is very much that they want to keep Ederson, but it's all changed potentially at Manchester City. And with the feeling that Pep Guardiola might leave in 2025, maybe other players that have got money on the table from Saudi Arabia and opportunities to be part of that ambitious project might start thinking that it's time to go. And I think that from the Saudis' perspective, what's important to understand is they drew up a list of about 20 really A-list stars, i.e. playing in the top 5 leagues of Europe or indisputably A-listers. And all the other names that come will outnumber those names in terms of how many foreigners join. But there's this list of 20, and Ederson is on it. And it's Al Ittihad who are the club to watch at the moment because they're in the market for a goalkeeper. They were the defending champions, but they haven't had a good season. And Al Hilal have run away with the league without losing a game. So they're in the market for a goalkeeper. And that one has substance, but they would have to obviously compensate Manchester City. And the expectation is that might be as high as 50 million euros.
Wow. God, that's a huge fee given Ederson's age as well.
Yeah, definitely. Can we take a zoom out, though, Ben, and look at Saudi as a whole? Of course, there's going to be players linked with moves to Saudi Arabia. We know the wages that they can pay. We know that clubs in this country, a lot of them are struggling with PSR regulations. But has the Saudi league worked? Because we are seeing top players linked, but we're not seeing a change, from my point of view, in terms of the eyeballs on the league. Can you notice a difference in terms of the perception of the Saudi league between now and where we were last season?
I think so. It's simply because it's the first season in a formative project that, even though everyone else is judging it by last summer and all the activity, the Saudi deal makers, particularly the central ones at the Ministry of Sport, are thinking about this between now and 2030, because that's when they have this thing called Vision 2030, and a sports strategy is a part of that to promote grassroots sport, men and women's sport, develop infrastructure, and all the other things that take time. And now we know that 2030 will go on and lead up to the 2034 World Cup. So I think those that haven't been to Saudi take the odd attendance because there's 4 big clubs, and in reality, there's only 3 with big attendances: Al Ittihad up in Jeddah and the 2 clubs in Riyadh, Al Nassr and Al Hilal, where Cristiano Ronaldo and the currently injured Neymar are. And outside of that, it's very easy to deride an attendance that is under 1,000. But when you're not in a country that has a top league statistically, a lot of the fans simply follow Premier League or Real Madrid or Barcelona, and they want to watch games on TV. And it lends to a culture where in Dammam, where Steven Gerrard's Al Ittifaq are, a lot of fans also follow Ronaldo and want to watch that on TV rather than go in the stadium. So it's about creating a league that has not just competitive teams, but more evenly followed teams. Because at the top end, the highest attendance across this last season that's just finished was 59,600,
wow,
which is very competitive as far as Premier League attendance is. And that was between Al Hilal and Al Fayha. And there's some other stats that I can just rattle off that I think do show we've seen progress over the last 12 months. First and foremost, 909 goals were scored. That's a 40% increase. There was 156 total foreign signings, not all of them these A-listers, but we all know about the Benzemas, the Mahrezes, the Manes, the Hendersons, the Mitroviches, the Neveses, and so on. The average age has gone down. That's significant, even with the foreigners coming in. And naturally, they're trying to mentor some of the younger Saudi players. league-specific channels on social media have grown by millions. 8 teams moved into brand new stadiums, which shows you that infrastructure has been invested in. And the sponsorship has more than tripled from 3 core league sponsors to 11. And there's 160 global broadcast partners, and there was barely any before the season started. So statistically, you can argue it both ways. I'm certainly not disputing that there's some numbers that don't look that great, and there's some exits like Henderson that don't look particularly good, but there's mitigating circumstances. And there is data that argues that year on year, it has actually been a very successful season as far as the Saudis are concerned.
Ben, when we spoke about Alisson and Ederson, you mentioned a long list of names, and I'm very intrigued to know who might be on there. Are there some names that you feel could be on the move over to Saudi this summer?
Yeah, so it's important to state that on this list of 20, they know they're not going to get all 20, and they don't define success or failure based upon that 20. They're looking for 5 to 8 marquee names out of a rough list of 20. And that means that if they get about 1 and 2, they will have surpassed their expectations. And on that list is Casemiro and Rafael Varane, who they're relatively optimistic about. In addition to that, as you've just mentioned, there's Alisson, Becker and Ederson. I think Liverpool are confident of keeping Ederson, but there were periods where they were confident of keeping their captain at the time, Jordan Henderson. There's Kevin De Bruyne, who's definitely going to be one to watch either in 2024 or 2025. My understanding is the Saudis think that he'll sign a new deal at Manchester City, but may become available along with Mo Salah in 2025. So again, that's an illustration that it's a patient project. And then outside of the Premier League, there's a few other big names that are worth keeping an eye on. João Felix is one, because Barcelona can't really afford to keep him. He only wants to stay at Barcelona, as does Rafinha, but it won't stop the Saudis trying, in the same way that they made a 300 million euros offer for Kylian Mbappe when we had that big fallout between Mbappe and PSG before that we knew he was definitively leaving at the end of this season. And Alvaro Morata is another one to watch that Al Shabab have tried for before, with a total salary of about £38 million over 3 years. Wow. Morata didn't want to go then. Let's see if he changes his mind.
Yeah, but I mean, that is a staggering sum of money. The one thing I do want to know, though, Ben, is that when you look at the names they got across last time around, it was ridiculous, and suddenly it really did feel like there was this big shift towards the Saudi League. But in your opinion, do you think that some players now might have looked at particularly that Jordan Henderson situation and thought, I'm really not sure about the competitiveness of this?
I think players need to do their due diligence, and that's maybe why we didn't see that many move in January. But also, a lot of the clubs had their quotas for foreigners filled, so they couldn't do that much. And that's worth bearing in mind as we head into this summer. There's 2 more spots, so you can have 10 foreigners, but 2 of them have to be 21 years of age or under. The other 8 stick as foreigners of any age. And most of the clubs have got a minimum of 5 foreigners, and some of them have already filled their quotas. So it might be a case of Saudi outgoings before they can bring in stars. But there's a nice little clause from the deal maker's perspective, which basically says, squad refresh, we can get rid of you earlier in the contract, and you accept a big sign-on fee, a bonus, accommodation, first-class flights, and all of the other perks. And maybe your 3-year contract will only be a 1-year contract. With Henderson's exit, I think Al Ittifaq are a tremendous club. They've just opened a new stadium. They've got a lot of Westerners in there now. It's not just Steven Gerrard. Dean Holden is the assistant manager. Liverpool's goalkeeping coach has just joined. Dr. Carl Todd is there, who is well respected in the industry in nutrition and sports science. So they're doing things foundationally the right way. I just think that Jordan Henderson didn't settle. And it's not for everyone, because the games are taking place at 9 at night. The first 2 months of the season are very humid. Training is later. It's a different language. And Henderson maybe thought, and it's ironic now, isn't it, that he was going to lose his Euros place if he did a full season at Ittifaq. And instead he went to Ajax and still lost his Euros place. But I think the bigger thing will be if Benzema goes, because the feeling in Al Ittihad is that they have to build a team around him. He arrived as the Ballon d'Or winner. If he leaves this summer, then that may put other players off a bit more than Henderson. One, because it's Benzema, with all due respect to Henderson, and two, because they're one of the big paying PIF clubs, and Al Ittifaq are not.
Ben Jacobs, fascinating as always. Ben Jacobs, their talkSPORT Saudi correspondent. 38 million, Kweku, by the way. What would you do with that?
Oh, mate.
What would you do with that?
I can't say on radio.
You wouldn't be here, would you?
I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here.
Before the break, we were talking about Elise, by the way. We've had a text from Chris, the Arsenal fan. He says he'd love Arsenal to sign Elise. He would fit right into their team.
I think every fan in the Premier League can say the same thing about Michael Elise. He would fit into any team, not only in the Premier League, but also in world football. He's that good.
And on the Saudi thing, by the way, get in touch, 03717 223344. If you're a fan of a club that potentially has some players to offload, which players do you want to offload to Saudi? Ben mentioned there Casemiro from Manchester United. Didn't have the best season last time out. Would that be good business for Manchester United? Give us a call on that, 03717 223344.
Yeah, as a Chelsea fan, we were helped out massively last summer. Kalidou Koulibaly, who was surplus to requirements, Edouard Mendy as well. We received decent fees for those players. And so if the market has kind of shrunk a little bit and Saudi clubs aren't as interested in taking on Premier League players, and that could cause an issue for some clubs who've got players on high wages.
Yeah, they spent it really well, Chelsea, as well, didn't they? They spent that money. Brilliant. Great business. Great business. Finally,
why do you look so happy with yourself?
Oh, brilliant stuff.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.